Okay, so we're starting officially Siman Shin Kafchet, which is about healing, and everybody knows that you can, you know, violate the Shabbat to save a life. But I still thought it's an interesting source to start off with. Um, so we have this Gemara in Yoma. Might be useful to have the Gemara open in the actual book because we might look at some Rashis. And actually, I stopped the Gemara right before it got interesting. But if you looked at it, it's in Pei Amud Aleph. Maybe. Well, actually, let's start with somebody to read. Anybody would like to read? Um, I could also read, but I think it's good a little bit let somebody read it first. Yeah, okay, go for it, Ruben. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. וכבר היה רבי ישמעאל ורבי עקיבא ורבי אלעזר בן עזריה מהלכים בדרך, ולוי הסדר ורבי ישמעאל בנו של רבי אלעזר בן עזריה מהלכים אחריהם. נשאלה
First of
שאלה
all,
זו
it almost sounds like the Haggadah of Pesach, right? They have this interesting group of people, Rabbi Elazar and Azariah. Rabbi Yishmael isn't in the Haggadah, but Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and then behind them, there are three of them, and then we have two more people who are like walking behind them. Well, one of them is the son of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, so I guess they're a younger generation, and they're asking. All right, so go ahead.
and Levi Hasadar, who Rashi did not have an explanation for,
Yeah,
which
what
was
the word sadar is. I
yeah.
have I could easily explain it by adding two letters and changing it to sandlar, but
Well,
just
also Sarad, if you switch the Dalet and the Resh, it's it's a net maker.
right, something like that. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that in one of the Hearot. Right, could be. Anyway, he was something. Levi Sadar or Sarad or whatever. He had some job. Okay, not important.
Okay, so yeah, and they were walking behind, so presumably younger generation. Nishala Sheila Zobifnehem, and this question was asked before them.
No, I think the younger two asked the older three.
Okay. Asked the older three. Minayin lepikuach nefesh shedochet Shabbat. So from where is it derived that pikuach nefesh is doche Shabbat? Okay. Na'ana Rabbi Yishmael v'amar im b'machteret yimatzeh haganav umazeh shesafek al mamun ba safek al nefashot ba ushvichut damim mitameh et haaretz v'gorem l'shchina shetistalek b'Yisrael ניתן להצילו בנפשו, קל וחומר לפיקוח נפש שדוחה את השבת. Okay, so first answer from Rabbi Yishmael, who quotes what exactly is this pasuk?
Well, this is famous. This is a famous. This is well, not famous.
Right.
This is a Gemara that you might have seen about a person who comes into your house
yeah.
Right. Find somebody breaking into your house in the night secretly. You're allowed to kill him. It's like we have the same law in like a lot of states in the United States that you can hold your ground. It's your house. You don't have to let him steal things. You can try to defend your castle. Thank you, Josie.
No, but the halachic thinking is a little different, right? Halachic thinking is a chazaka, the ein adam mami natzmo al mamono. A person doesn't restrain. It's not saying it's good or bad. A person defends it. If that's the case, then the thief already knows it somewhere in his brain, even though he's breaking in the middle of the night. If he has to, And there was an old, I have to say, there was an old British crime movie from the late 50s. They had these nitty British crime movies. in which the young guy who's part of the group breaking into the factory. Anyway, they end up killing the guard who found them, night watchman. And the young guy goes, Nick, you promised me there'd be no blood. And Nick looks at him, are you crazy, kid? You know? Crazy.
Right. You gotta, if you're exactly, that's what the Gemara is saying. The Ganef is prepared to kill you for your money because he knows that you're gonna, if you wake up and you see him, you'll defend your money, and then he's prepared to kill you. So now you he's trying to kill you ultimately, even though he's just trying to get money. Really, he'll ultimately might kill you, so you can kill him even though he didn't even pull a gun yet. That's the halacha, and what Rabbi Yishmael says here is interesting. He says, So the Gemara is going to talk about this later. So let's hold off. But at the moment, we're saying we don't know if he's actually going to kill you. We don't know if he's going to kill you or he's just taking your money. And yet you can kill him. And yet, shvichut damim is mitameh et haaretz, and gorem l'shchina shetistalek, which means it's a pretty bad thing. And nevertheless, nitan lahatzilo b'nafsho, you can kill him. Kal v'chomer l'pikuach nefesh, so too for pikuach nefesh shedoche et Shabbat. So explain to me that kal v'chomer. So the more so pikuach nefesh that shedoche. What's the kal? What's the kal? What's the chomer?
Could it be that you are allowed to kill in order to save your own life, and so all the more so you're allowed to save the life of another, or something?
No, but then that would be equal. That would be equal.
That it would be
We have to
equal,
find
then
it.
become
We have to
a
find it that it's that here. Then it's to be like if here we can do it, then certainly there we can.
If you can be over on if you can kill somebody to save your own life, which is one of these Yehareg v'Yal Ya'avor types of things. Although this isn't that situation, but to just give an idea of the severity of it, Alacha Kama V'Kama, just Shabbat you could break.
Right. Shabbat, exactly. So Shabbat is not something that is, even though Shabbat is a very important mitzvah and actually a very chamur mitzvah, and we do actually get, I think, galut, right? They say that right? It says in the Torah that the land will get its rests. So maybe that's Shemitah is talking about. But Shabbat is certainly central mitzvah, and yet it's not mitameh ta'aretz v'gorem l'shchina shetistalek. It doesn't cause the shchina to go out from Israel, from the Jewish people. So Shabbat is not as bad as murder, and yet you can murder to save your, not murder, you can kill to save your money. And you can say, Kol Sheken, you could break Shabbat to save your life, which is even more important than your money. I mean, even there, maybe on Shabbat, you're also maybe in the Ma'am Machdirat, you're also saving your own life. So, but the point is, you're saving your life by doing killing, whereas here you're saving your life by only breaking Shabbat. And also, the Gemara said, even he's safek that he's coming to kill you at all, and nevertheless you could kill him.
Let me just say this is a very good section to play around with. We're not going to do, I'm sure, not doing any more than that right now, because it also, just in terms of how the Gemara talks about it, it's like the chiddush that the Torah teaches us, because killing is so bad, shvichas dam is so bad. So, but there's a chiddush that you can save your life, or you should save your life. There's always like a chiddush. That's important,
right?
And you can play around with it a lot.
As you might have thought, right? You might have thought, no, don't like. I mean, I certainly could imagine certain Christian theology saying you don't kill somebody even if you get killed. You know, you should never take life. I don't know if they have a concept of defend yourself even if it means killing somebody. Anyway, I'm not a Christian scholar. So that's Rabbi Yishmael's. What's Rabbi Akiva's drasha?
Okay, Rabbi Akiva. נענה רבי עקיבא ואמר, וכי יזיד איש על רעהו וגומר, מעם מזבחי תיקחנו למות, מעם מזבחי ולא מעל מזבחי. Should I pause here before Rabba Bar Chana?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
should
you can
I?
explain it. Yeah, explain what he's talking about.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
I can explain it. I had a lot of trouble with
Oh, there's a
with this.
Rashi on it.
This is Rashi, great. Okay, Rabbi Akiva answers and he says, so he quotes this pasuk from Shemot, if a person sort of purposefully comes at or comes upon his neighbor and kills him, you shall take from my altar tikachenu lamut, so that he might die or be put to death. It says me'im mizbechi, not me'al mizbechi, from my altar, not from upon my altar. And I will read the Rashi because
Yeah, let's look at the Rashi.
struggle.
I was gonna say,
Okay.
let's look at the Rashi.
So me'im mizbechi, it's written, it's opposed to me'al. Im kohen hu shebala avod avoda. So if the person in question is, if the murderer is a kohen and has come to do the priestly service,
Right.
If this person is a
Even if he's a
kohen who's
Kohen and he
come,
wants to come and do the service, you still take him and you
you'll take
bring him to court. You know.
okay. So nevertheless, even though he's a kohen who's come to perform the service, you still take him away for execution immediately. You don't wait.
Right.
V'lo me'al,
But you don't take him from on top of the mizbech. What does that mean?
you don't take him from on top of the mizbeach. Im hitchil ba'avoda ein mafsik lavo lidon, ela mashlim avodato. Okay. So if he has actually started the performance of the service, you don't pause to take him away for judgment. You allow him to finish the service.
Right. I guess now this is my explanation. I didn't really see this anywhere, but my understanding is that once he started it, like if you would stop him in the middle, I'm not really that expert in kudshim, but like it might be that you can't. Once you pull him away, then that korban is not batel. Like you can't have another kohen step in. I don't know. He's got to finish the job. If he didn't finish the job, then the sacrifice is like lost. We got to do it again. If we interrupt him, that's like somehow worse. So we don't going to interrupt him. If he's already started, we'll let him finish, and then we'll take him to court. Okay. So go back to the Gemara.
Okay. Okay. V'amar Rabba Bar Chana amar Rabbi Yochanan lo shanu ele lehamit aval lehachayot afilu me'al mizbechi. ומה זה שספק יש ממש בדבריו, ספק אין ממש בדבריו, ועבודה דוחה שבת, קל וחומר לפיקוח נפש שדוחה את השבת. Okay.
All right. So you got to explain here.
Yes. Okay. So
Good Rashi. Avalachayot.
Rashi aval hachayot. So to preserve life as opposed to execute or to kill. Right. So if he can testify to someone else's innocence.
Right. So this drasha doesn't apply in that case.
Right.
In other words, we would take him from the middle of his service of the korban and like let's say mevata the korban. Lo shanu ela lahamit aval lachayot afilu me'al mizbechi, even though he's in the middle. And then what's the Drukav Chomer? Umazesh is safek yesh mamash b'drav. Wait a second. Maybe he's just going to come and testify, and we're going to find out that this Kohen's testimony is like internally contradictory. We're going to throw it out. So we don't know if there's mamash b'drav, or maybe it's irrelevant information, but we thought it was relevant. Safek sheyesh mamash, safek ein mamash. Maybe it's not a good testimony b'drav. Va'avodah doche Shabbat. And we see that avodah, in other words, you're allowed to sacrifice an animal doing shchita on Shabbat. It's doche Shabbat. Kal v'chomer lepikuach nefesh doche et Shabbat. So Rashi, avodah, chamura shedoche et Shabbat. Mafsikim l'hatzalat nefeshot. So in other words, we stop avodah, which is more important than Shabbat, to save a life. So certainly we should stop Shabbat to save a life. If we're going to stop an avodah to save a life, then we're going to stop Shabbat to save a life. That's what I understand, right? It's good. It's all funny because everybody knows v'chai b'hem. I don't know if these are also drashot, like apparently.
But we will
equal-
see a reason why people only know v'chai b'hem.
Well, that's going to be the final pilpel charifa.
Right,
Right.
not only the final one, but the strongest. So it is, if people are only going to remember
No.
one, it is
Right.
objectively the best
The
one to
Gemara
remember.
gives an expression at the end, which I didn't give you, which is better one spicy pepper than a barrel full of bland vegetables. So if you have
Yeah,
one good
but,
drasha,
but it's still a good thing, right? I mean, we're seeing that the system can be understood on the, excuse me for using this word, on the best of getting there, on the best yashrut ideas.
right? I mean, you could almost argue that the Gemara, by bringing all these different sources, is showing that this is a consistent idea in the Talmud.
Right.
That it's not just, I think that's what you're saying. It's not, it's like we find it backwards and forwards. We find it in various places. We see that it's a major, it's well founded in the literature. It's not like a one extraneous source that, can always find a medrash to support, whatever opinion you want to say. But here we have something that's many people are bringing all different locations for this idea. Fine. So anyway, so let's go back to the drasha here. So it's a suffix. He says it's a suffix. Maybe it's a suffix whether this guy is actually going to save anybody. Whereas by nefashot, maybe it's vadai. You're going to save a life. So certainly, but that's not the way the drasha works. You see, the question is, what is this suffix doing in here? And well, why is it talking about suffix? Just say he's, even if it's not suffix b'devarav, he is stopping an avoda, which is hamur from Shabbat. So certainly we'll start Shabbat to save a life. Why do we have to add this extra point of suffix? That suffix yesh mamashut b'devarav. Suffix yesh, there's some react. It's only a suffix gives testimony, and even so, it's like almost a double kal v'chomer. I'll leave it to later to talk about it, but
It's important because at this point they're trying to prove that you can break Shabbat even for safek pikuach nefesh, but later they're gonna
exactly. Okay, thank you. No, yeah, that's. I'm glad you said that. That's what I wanted to say. I didn't know if I should say it, but you said it, so that's great. That's perfect. Exactly. So what we're basically saying is this whole suffix. We also saw in the previous one, suffix ba mamon, suffix ba nefashot, right? And yet we were able to kill to save only suffix nefashot. And so to here we have suffix whether he's going to help anybody or not, and yet we're still going to stop the avoda in the middle. So certainly we should break Shabbat even on a suffix. All right, now I have another question for you. What extra halacha do we get? This is a harder question. What extra halacha do we get from Rabbi? Why is Rabbi Akiva's drasha more productive than Yishmael? If you understand what I mean by productive, does it produce more dinim? Why is Rabbi Yish? Rabbi Akiva should have just said, "Okay, Rabbi Yishmael, you're great." Why did he have to give another drasha? Does it produce a greater chiddush? Is it more productive in any way? Or is it equal? Maybe it's just the same, just a different source.
I guess it depends a little bit on whether or not the Machteret case is one in which it's just Mamono or also Gufo. But the Rabbi Yishmael's case is about taking another life and a Kal V'chomer there, and this is about two this is about a parallel of two potential savings. One because the Kohen has testimony, and one because of Pikuach Nefesh. Does that make sense?
Wait a second. No, the potential testimony is a din that we already know, and everybody agrees to. He's only adding that you can also, well, but think about what din if we had Rabbi. All right, so I hear what you're saying, but anybody else have another? That's good what you're saying, but anybody else have more? When the guy came to your house, whose house was it? When the guy broke into your machteret, it's your house. What about this case of what about Rabbi Akiva's case?
Yeah, it's teaching us that, like, okay, you could learn out from that first case. You can save your life or your family's life or anyone in your household, but not beyond that necessarily. But with this of the Kohen doing its service, we're learning out like anybody's life could be saved.
Right. I think it's not written here in black and white, but I think that's exactly what I was thinking. That Rabbi Akiva has a greater Kiddush, that he's saying, even if it's somebody else's life, you can break Shabbat. Because you could learn, Rabbi Yishmael saying, like if someone breaks into if I'm in somebody else's house and a Ganav comes in and he says, I want to steal, and I think he's going to steal all the money of I can just, I don't have to kill. Maybe I can't kill. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what the din is. I never thought about that case before. But possibly the din is that you can't kill him because it's not your money. Ein adam omed al mamono, but mamon chavero. I don't know if you're going to start killing people to save other people's money. I don't know if that's permitted. So it might be that according to Rabbi Yishmael's Rashi, you couldn't save another life, just your own. But I mean, it's whatever. Maybe it's a forced. I mean, I'm just being very meduya. All right, let's go on to the next. It's not necessarily what I'm saying, but it doesn't necessarily. I'm just saying it's a hint, sort of a hint that we see a little bit greater thing in Rabbi Akiva. Okay, what does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah say?
נענה רבי אלעזר ואמר, ומה מילה שהיא אחד מ-248 איברים שבאדם דוחה את השבת, קל וחומר לכל גופו שדוחה את השבת. Okay, so he says.
Not to translate it. I think we all got
Okay.
that, but now this drasha, it sounds very nice in shul. If you're like in shul, it's very simple drasha. You can do meal on Shabbos, which is just a fixed one room, and you can certainly do anything. But I don't like this drasha so much. Why don't you? Does anybody have any difficulty with this drasha?
I mean, Mila's like a specific mitzvah. Like, are we gonna like? It has its own commandments around it.
Right, it's a chiddush. It's a special chiddush that on the Yom HaShmini, and so we say if Yom HaShmini is Shabbat, for sure it says Yom HaShmini, so you have to do it. It's not because it's an Eivar. It's not like let's seal your finger. It's not like we know from Mila that you can save a finger. You can save any Eivar, and therefore if you can save Eivar, you can save a body. Doesn't seem like there's much potential to expand the law of Mila. On the other hand, this drasha would go over really well if you're like talking to a crowd, because everybody knows that Mila, you can break Shabbat. So, that's just whatever. It sounds poetically nice. Logically, that doesn't quite make sense, but poetically, it's very. That's my take on it.
I think it's like the Rashi here is drawing upon like some midrashim that talk about Mila as a tikkun. So like you have to take those midrashim very literally. Like it's like the same way it's a tikkun, Mila is a tikkun. So
right, Rashi says
would be like a
Mila.
tikkun for the whole person.
Well, we find that in Tanakh too. Be circumcised and be perfect to me. Right. So.
Right. Rashi says, look, he says, right. That's right. It says be perfect. Uma Mila. Shehi tikkun echad me'evarav. It's one of the perfections. It's one element, one fixing of one element of your body. And why is he? This is the key point that he's adding. Why is it that we can doche Shabbat? It's because every day you go without a milah, you're chayav karet. You have to have the milah on the 8th day. So because it's chayav karet, lachar zman, if you do it, if you wait. So like, because it's a karet, you could break Shabbat, but other things aren't karet. It actually makes it even more difficult. Normal saving of a life is necessarily karet. You don't get karet for not chayben, for dying. Anyway, the drasha is a little bit, I would say, amami. That's but anyway. Okay, so let's go on.
Okay.
Now we have new
Rabbi,
people. Now we have new people who were not there at the scene. It's interesting, right? These are up to now we had the 3 people who were there.
right, now we have Rabbi
people who
Yossi.
who are about the same generation, I think, really also late Tanaim. Like 4th generation Tanaim. They're also around the same time period, but not at that event. Okay, go ahead. Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda Omer.
Okay. Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda Omer, et Shabtotai tishmeru. The word that appears before this, importantly, is ach. We just don't quote it here. Et Shabtotai tishmeru. Yachol lakol, Talmud lomar ach chalak. So I think what this means is, right, the verse teaches, you shall keep my Shabbatot. And you might have thought that I think the kol means here, like in all circumstances. You might have thought that means always, no matter what extenuating circumstances there are. Talmud lomar ach, but the Torah adds the word ach chalak, which I think means to make a chiluk to sort of qualify that statement. No, there are some cases in which you might have to be halal Shabbos.
Right. In other words, if it had just said, et shabtotai tishmaru, then I would have thought, no matter what, keep Shabbat. Doesn't matter no other. But it says ach shabtotai tishmaru, so therefore there must be some exceptions to that shmira. Therefore, what's the exception? Must be pikuach nefesh. I don't know. It could be something else, but must be pikuach nefesh. Also, okay, fine. The next one.
Next one, Rabbi Yonatan ben Yosef Omer, ki kodesh hilachem, which is, I think that's the next verse, right after the one above. Hi mesura biyadchem velo atem mesurim biyada. So it says, ki kodesh hilachem, it is kodesh to you, for you.
For you, it's kodesh for you.
For you.
Hi mesura biyadchem velo atem mesurim biyada.
Right, Shabbos is given into your hands. You are not given into its hands.
Right. So, like, it almost sounds like it's saying, you can decide. You want to keep Shabbat. Don't keep Shabbat. It's up to you. It's biyadchem. That's not what it means. But I'm just saying, it almost sounds like that. But right, it's not that Shabbat. You're given into Shabbat. You're bounded by Shabbat. No, you're in charge. What does it mean you're in charge? Your soul is in charge. Your soul is more important than Shabbat. So you can live and violate Shabbat and not have to be held in by Shabbat. Kodesh lechem, he mesura biyad. I think that's a nice drasha. I mean, I don't know why I'm giving grades to everybody, but I feel when I see so many drashas, I just have to give an opinion. Okay, but they're all obviously, they're all brilliant, I'm sure, and they probably could explain to me why they're right and I'm mistaken. Anyway, Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya Omer.
Okay, Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya Omer, v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, Amra Torah chalel alav Shabbat achat, k'dei shishmor Shabbatot harbeh.
Oh, this one people have heard. This one I think people have heard, right? People have heard this one, keeping many Shabbatot. What's the drasha? This one also
So,
relies on the rest of the pasuk.
aha.
What's the whole pasuk? You all know it from Kiddush. Shamru v'nei Yisrael Shabbat. What's the next word?
L'asot Shabbat l'dorotam brit olam.
Right. So
be Cholel Shabbos, one Shabbos on the behalf of this other person, so that they will be able to observe.
more
Go on and
Shabbat.
observe many.
How do you get that from the drush, from the pasuk? Look at Rashi. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael to Shabbat. See the Rashi?
Yes. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat k'dei la'asot Shabbatot acharot yizharu b'Shabbos zo b'kiyum shmirat Shabbatot harbeh. Wait, I'm not sure I understand. So they will observe, like the people of Israel will observe Shabbos in order to do many other Shabboses.
Yeah, Kedei. When it says V'shamru v'nei Yisrael to Shabbat, la'asot Shabbat, you have to add a word in there. The pasuk should really be understood. V'shamru, when you say Kiddush, say it like this: V'shamru v'nei Yisrael to Shabbat, kedei la'asot Shabbat, l'dorotam brit olam. Which means like this: keep Shabbat. By the way, there's a lot of material here. This is a very good Gemara for, like, I don't know, teaching to a mixed crowd. Because there's a lot of interesting ideas. But keep Shabbat in a way that you'll be able to keep Shabbat. What does that mean? Keep other Shabbatot. Shamru v'nei Yisrael Shabbat, kedei la'asot Shabbat. Do your shmirah of Shabbat should be in such a way that you can do more shmirah Shabbat. So literally, I don't even have to do with it all with another person or with you. Even with you, you can break Shabbat so that you can keep more Shabbatot.
It's
So you
kind of I don't know, you call it a utilitarian argument.
Explain.
The greater,
you're getting more
greater utility will take place by this violation of Shabbat, because it allows for Shabbat to be more observed.
Right.
So this utility, then theoretically, if you know the guy, the guy's going to pass on next day, well, doesn't help. But nonetheless, who knows? Maybe
we never know when somebody's going to die.
Maybe he'll make it through. So
maybe he'll make it a whole nother week. Right.
I guess I'm putting this up now because I didn't think of it in terms of the other drushes, but that it's not so bad to label them just in terms of learning. I'm not saying it's exactly right, to see where they're getting, what are they trying to tell us?
I want to be very careful, but also you could read this to say that if the person is not Shomer Shabbos, then maybe you shouldn't.
Right. There are those that
I very carefully say that, but you could take it in that kind of a direction.
Of course, you don't know. He might do. Might be Choser B'tshuva. How can you ever know that somebody will not start keeping Shabbat the next week?
Well, but nonetheless, I think you're right.
Yeah. In other words, I hear you. Yeah, I haven't heard that, Max. Definitely.
I'm glad
they bring that.
Yeah, I just have to say in the middle of this is that I had a guy like that visiting him at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. There's another rabbi who came in, and this guy was such a apikoros. That's all I could say. Oh, guy from Europe. He had apikoros. But he said to me, he said a good Shabbos. And so my chaver, who had come also, said, I was on Shabbos, I was visiting him. He said, look, it's Mekayim Zachar.
Right. Huh?
Every time you say good Shabbos, Mekayim Zachar.
Right. If I'm out. Rav Moshe is a tshuva where he talks, not really related, but he talks about somebody who's like in a coma, and people say, well, why can't I just pull the plug? He can't do any mitzvahs. And Rav Moshe says, who says? Maybe he's doing the 6 zechiros. Maybe he could be thinking about the 6 zechiros, it's 6 mitzvahs, to remember Amalek, to remember Shabbat, to remember, and do that without speaking. Okay, so yeah, this guy, right? He's keeping Shabbat in a certain way. He's saying good Shabbos. Okay, let's go on. And now,
Okay.
last one. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel.
Okay, last and perhaps best one. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel I havai hatam hava amena didi adiva midid hu v'chai behem v'lo shemut behem. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, if I had been there, I would have said that mine is better than theirs. My proof is better than theirs, which is the
Is like kind of saying, like, in my opinion, mine is the best. But I wasn't there. Maybe, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe he's saying I would have actually told them to their faces mine is better. But I can't because I wasn't there. I don't know exactly. Or he might have said I wasn't there to discuss it with them. But right. Whatever he meant exactly. If he had been there, he would have told them that his is better. So he thinks his is better. All right. V'chai behen v'lo shi'amut behen. So it says, by the way, what's the pasuk? What's the pasuk of V'chai behen?
Ushmartem et chukotai ve'et mishpatai asher yaseh otam ha'adam v'chai behem.
Yafe ma'od. Yafe ma'od.
Ani Hashem, yeah.
Which is what? Is that talking about Shabbat?
Not specifically.
Not specifically. It's a general mitzvah that's saying that all the mitzvahs. So in what way is it more expansive? Actually, first of all, Chai doesn't talk about Shabbat, right? It just says again, it just says do the mitzvahs in such a way that you'll continue living. So the Shabbat observance should be in such a way that you continue living. So too, all of your mitzvahs observance should be not just Shabbat. For example, what would be another example that his drasha would include that maybe some other drashas wouldn't? Maybe Bab Machteret wouldn't. I can think of one simple one, maybe.
Yom Kippur?
Yeah, maybe Yom Kippur. Maybe Yom Kippur is more chamur. It's more chamur than Shabbat. Maybe on Yom Kippur you shouldn't. All these ones are for Shabbat. What about Yom Kippur? Maybe Chai B'Hem teaches even. I mean, obviously we have the special drasha, but not what about Avodah Zarah? What about Shfichat Damim? So there's certain things that obviously we don't include in this concept. You can't do Avodah Zarah in order to save your life, because I think we have separate drushes for that, or maybe it's a svara, but his is much more inclusive. And certainly, let's say maybe the other ones didn't include Yom Kippur, so maybe that's why his is better. Maybe that's what he meant, that it's better. I'm just trying to say, well, why is this better? Is it better? Essentially, is it better, stronger, bro? Well, in other words, what's the difference between this one and Shamar B'nai Israel Lasot Shabbat? It's also good. Also good drasha. Why is his better? Ye Shabbati Masur Lechem. By the way, there's a difference. If you notice, there's a basic difference between the later drushes and the original 3 drushes. The original 3 drushes were all Kal V'chomers. And the other drushes are not Kal V'chomers. They're just like logical inferences from the psukim. They're not Kal V'chomers. What's the problem with the Kal V'chomer? You can always have a pircha. You can always find that we find an example that disproves it, and we maybe didn't think of it. We thought of. Rabbi Landis, you got something?
Yeah, well, thought about this one a lot. I think because as a drasha, it's the biggest chiddush in the world, because the context of the pasuk, as Ruvain read it, is what gives life? Doing the mitzvahs. Nothing else is important. You don't have techelos in your tzitzis, it's not worth living. Life comes for that. And the rabbinic, what am I talking to? Talking to a bunch of guys who go to seminaries, and the Drushas Chazal, who says that every kid in yeshiva, little kid in yeshiva, thinks it's part of the pasuk. It's such a victory for Chazal in terms of thinking what the thought is. Because what's
what's part of the
I'll
pasuk?
figure it out now. Because what's it totally on? It's totally on the letter Vav, a conjunctive Vav. And you shall live with them? No. The Vav is but, and you're mevatel the entire pasuk beforehand if there's no life. So Chazal figured this one out. I think we stick with it because it's catchy, and it's I don't know. It's the opposite of religious fundamentalism for a change. It's like real belief. You talk to. I did it with my grandson. I asked him to finish the pasuk. He knew the pasuk by heart, and he said,
That's the pasuk.
That's
I
it.
for many years thought
a rabbinic Jew. That's how Jews have to think. They're supposed to,
I for many years thought the pasuk was the other pasuk was what Yaakov said. Im lovin garti, v'tariag mitzvos shamarti.
Yeah.
But that's
But
the
it
pasuk.
does mean that. But it does, because they're right. They're right. Sorry.
Garti is otiot tariag.
Tariag. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
so sometimes the drasha is is into your head that you don't even know that it's not
That's
the pasuk.
right. And it becomes
that's the way.
Becomes an absolute drasha, except for three things, and then the whole Gemara there has to, Perik Shemini of Sanhedrin has to figure it out. But it's, but yeah, becomes all I can say to that is,
Right.
I wish I had a bottle of beer in my hand. I'd say, L'chai.
L'chai behem.
Jews don't know, might not know any other word, including a good Shabbos. Yeah, L'chaim. Or, as some would say, L'chaim. But fine.
Okay.
I said enough. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, but I agree with you. Right. I remember actually Rabbi darshaning that the vav is the but. You're right. But just to remind us that it's a more inclusive drasha in the sense that it includes. It's not specifically talking about Shabbat at all.
Right.
Okay, so we have all these different drashas, and the Gemara goes on. I didn't give you the rest of the Gemara. The Gemara goes on. I'll just tell you what it says. You could look there. It basically it says that all of these drashas don't, like a lot of these drashas have a pirka in the sense that they don't teach suffix. They don't necessarily teach suffix because the way we explained Ababa Machteret was that we don't know if he's coming to kill you or not. And he says, yeah, but according to Rava in the Gemara, we do know, we have a hazaka that he's coming to kill you. Because of these steps, we say, for sure he's going to come and kill you because you're going to stand on your money and then he's going to have to kill you to get the money so you can kill him now. So it's not a suffix, it's a vadai. So that drasha doesn't prove a very important law. We need to prove that you can also mechal Shabbos on suffix nefashot. I really should have given the rest of the Gemara because it's crucial.
Right.
It's crucial. We're not just saying that you can violate Shabbat to save a life. You can violate Shabbat to save suffix. And the Gemara is uncomfortable with the first drashas because they all have a pircha. Because there all could be cases where it's vadai, according to at least one opinion. Also, in the case of the Kohen with testimony, it could be, according to one opinion, it should be that the Kohen has two witnesses. We don't take it from the middle of the avoda until there are two rabbis standing next to him who ask him what his testimony is, and they determine there on the spot if it's good, if it's mamash or not mamash, if it's useful or not. And they won't take him away unless it's mamash, says one opinion. So according to that opinion, we wouldn't be able to do something. So all of these drushes in the beginning, or at least the three that have that are Kal V'chomers, don't work to prove that you can mechal Shabbos even for a suffix. But the other ones do. But the last one does, let's say. What does he say? Just a sec. Yeah, there's no pircha on the other ones. The other, actually, I don't know, not just the last one, but the other ones in general don't have a pircha because they're not doing a kal v'chomer. They're just saying shabtotai tishmaru. Or the last one, b'chai b'hem, you shouldn't die in them, even if it's a suffix. Even if you might, in other words, how do you learn that? That's what we got to say. We got to say, how do you get suffix from chai b'hem? How do you get suffix from chai b'hem? The answer is because chai b'hem is an absolute requirement. Chai b'hem, you must live by them. You must live by them, which means that if there's a chance that you would die, you can't keep Shabbat. If there's a chance, because there's an absolute chiyuv to chai b'hem. That's the way I understand it. And then the Gemara ends with a famous quote: "Tava chada pilpota harifa mimale sana dekari," which means better is a barrel. Is one pepper that's spicy than a barrel full of bland vegetables. And what they were saying is better is one good drasha than a lot of drashas that are not really that good. So everyone, any comments? Anyway, so that's the chai ben. We gave a nice Shavuos cheer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's a Tikkun El Shavuos right there. In case you need it, you got it.
You got it, guys. You're all ready to give your. Okay, let's go on a little bit. Actually, Lexi, do you want to read a little bit? Are you in the mood?
Yeah, happy to.
So we're now going to what I called representative opinions of the question of a famous question, which is a machloket rishonim, which is when we say that you can violate Shabbat, is it hutra or dechuya? What do we mean by hutra and dechuya? Hutra means it's like absent. Shabbat is gone, and you can just do whatever needs to be done. And dechuya means no, it's still there, but we push it off. And what it comes down to, really, the difference would be something like this. It's not clear 100% what the difference is, and I'll explain that in a minute. But what it comes down to kind of is like this. Dechuya would mean if you're saving a life, you should still try to minimize. Maybe that's what it means. You should still try to minimize the averas that you do. But hutra might mean no, you don't have to minimize. But well, maybe that's not a best explanation. But hutra is sort of a stronger idea than dechuya. We'll have to see what it means. So the Rambam actually, I brought you a source where he calls it dechuya. I didn't bring you. There's another place in the Rambam, I don't have it in front of me, where he does use the word hutra. So it's a little bit confusing in the Rambam. But go ahead, Lexi. Look at this Rambam here.
Right. So he says, "Dechuya hi Shabbat etzel sakanat nefashot kishar kol mitzvot." Right. So Shabbos, like all other mitzvot except for a couple exceptions, is dechuya, is sort of pushed off when in a case of potential danger to life. לפיכך, כל שיש בו סכנה, עושים לו כל צרכיו בשבת על פי רופא אומן של אותו מקום. So therefore, somebody who is sick in a way that is endangers their life, then you can do anything that is needed for them on Shabbos, ideally by virtue of a expert doctor in that place. ספק שהוא צריך לחלל עליו את השבת, ספק שאינו צריך, וכן אם אמר רופא לחלל עליו את השבת, ורופא אחר אומר אינו צריך, מחללים עליו את השבת שספק נפשות דוחה את השבת. If there's an uncertainty as to whether they're kind of in a dangerous enough place that we would be machal Shabbos for them, or you have competing doctors' opinions as to whether they're, in mortal danger, we default to violating Shabbos to save them, because even the safek nefashot, even the uncertainty about risk to life is enough to push off Shabbos.
Okay, perfect. That's all. And I underlined the word dechuya just so you see the word dechuya. So here, now read the next. This is a Maharam Mirottenberg, who's like, most important Ashkenazi posek, pretty much, more or less.
And teacher of Rosh.
Teacher of the Rosh, right, who was the other most important. Okay, go ahead.
שמורי, היך מותר לשחוט לחולה בשבת שיש איסור סקילה, מוטב שיקנו לו נבלה שהיא בלאו. So this question of like, why am I allowed to shecht an animal on Shabbos, which is an Isser skila? Why not just buy for them non-kosher meat, which like is at most an Isser, like the eating of the nevela is an Isser lav, and the buying again is like maybe not even a doraita
Right.
prohibition period, certainly not skila.
Why would you do shchita, which is a clear violation? Just give him treifa. I mean, treifa is also a violation, but you're not breaking Shabbat. It's just a
Right.
lot.
There's no Isser skila that's being violated on any end.
Right. Now, if you had to choose which Avera to break, eating treifa is a less of an Avera than Shabbat. So why don't I try to choose the least Isser? Makes a lot of sense. So therefore, I should eat the nevela. That's the question. Sorry about the dollar there. It should be just lav, but you read it correctly.
ולטעמך, תקשלהו היך שוחטים ביום טוב, עשה ולא תעשה, נחל נבלה שהיא בלאו. Okay, according to your logic, then also like why are we allowed to shecht on Yantif, mishum like ochel nefesh, right? Why not say, if you really need to eat on Yantif and that can be like docha something, why not just eat nevela, which again is like an Isser lav instead of an Isser skila.
Right.
Inami nomar legoy she'inichor ofot delo asiri elamid rabbanan, right? That like also the why not just tell the goy to like do the particular form of like puncturing that we do with birds, which is only in Isser Rabbanan since Amira legoy, I suppose. As opposed to doing it for yourself, and then also the questions of whether a goy can do anything that's considered shechting. But fine, there's different ways that basically you could avoid yourself shechting an animal, seemingly that would procure food for you. The ein shlita le'of min haTorah, right? That because you're not actually, if you do this thing on the bird, that's not considered to be doraita level shlita. That's only on like a behema. So maybe that wouldn't even be a doraita iser. Although we do ultimately often end up saying that like whatever, that killing for a purpose would still be, even if it's not considered shlita for other purposes. I think that actually would be shlita for Shabbos. But beside the point, why not do something that's like less problematic on Yontif? Ella yesh lomar kevan dehaTorah hitira lanu ochel nefesh haveledidan ochel nefesh b'yom tov k'mo chol shemutar bo kol malacha. Rather, we can say that like when the Torah permits us like this ochel nefesh, like the needs of our food on Yantif, it's not that like, oh, Yantif is kind of like, if you imagine someone kind of like pushing it aside, but it's kind of like you're like holding it against it, like waiting for it to like snap back into place, right? It's like, it's just not there. Vis-a-vis ochel nefesh, you're just operating in a world where like it's not Yantif and those prohibitions don't exist. Do the hashtanami, so and here too, nema kevan bikuach nefesh yalfinan biyoma deshare, have kol malacha lecholesh yesh basakana muteret kamo bechol. Right, and so we could say the same principle here, right? That just as vis-a-vis ochel nefesh, it must be that the reason we can do shchita is because it's just not considered forbidden, right? It's not that it's like forbidden, but you're allowed to do it for this purpose. It's actually that like vis-a-vis that purpose, it isn't forbidden. Right? And so the same thing should apply here, that when it comes to saving a life, it's not that like forbidden things are allowed for you to save their life. It's that when saving a life, the things you're doing are just permissible, are just not prohibited. Behechati ika hetera v'isora kame ma'achilinoto hakal. Deshkuta hama'achal atzmo mutar v'lo nevelot she'ma'achal atzmo asor. Varya Ravya Alaihu. Okay, and then he's like, if there are in front of you like permissible and forbidden things, then like you feed them the permissible thing, or like at least they get into this whole thing of like you feed them in the order of like the least problematic prohibition. Because the shchuta, like in the case of shchuta, the food itself is mutter. And so you should feed them shchuta, and instead of nevela, where you're feeding the person, iser. So I just finished reading that paragraph.
Yes, all right. My computer crashed. I don't know why. So I wasn't there for a minute. So where are we?
I just finished the shoot Maharam. Right, where again he makes this kind of distinction. He makes the comparison to Yantif, and he argues that like why on Yantif are we allowed to do shechting instead of eating food in some other way? Again, it's because like it's not that sort of the Isser, something is prohibited, but for this purpose you're allowed to do it. It's that for this purpose this thing isn't prohibited. The prohibition just doesn't exist. And like all malacha for that purpose is permitted. And so he's like, and the same thing can be true for pikuach nefesh, that like it's just that vis-a-vis pikuach nefesh, all malacha is permissible.
Right. So wait a second. So would you call that hutra or dechuya?
Hutra.
Right. So he's saying hutra. In the sense, right, that all malacha is, of course, he would still agree that you can't do extraneous malacha. You can't
right, that anything that is needed.
Right. You can't smoke a cigarette while you're doing the shechita. It's not like because you need to eat, you can now do anything. You can do things that are necessary. Things that are unnecessary, you still can't do. So he seems to be coming on the side of hutra, at least in that sense, and therefore, don't eat nevela. Okay.
In terms of regarding terminology, because I've been thinking about this sort of other matters recently, is that you have hutra, and you have, as you say, dechuya, moving it upwards, like dechuya, hutra. It's not beetle. It's not, it's not like, as you were saying, with Danzig, it's not like that the mitzvah falls away. You're matter to do what you need to do, but you can't do anything else. There's no beetle of the mitzvah. So,
Right.
So like, I would tell my Baal Batum, you're driving someone to the hospital, maybe your spouse to the hospital, or whoever, but say spouse for the baby and all that, don't turn on the radio. And make sure you do turn off the car and park it so that it won't be towed. So in case you have to go back and forth, whatever that is. But don't turn on the radio. Once without the radio, I crash. All right, so turn on the radio. But normal speak, it's not a beetle.
I like your svara about the parking. Saying you may need to use the car again. You may need.
Well, it's based on Rav Moshe.
Mm-hmm.
Moshe allowed doctors. By Alta Zeta, the Hart Tzvi didn't. Rav Moshe had a very good heter on that.
All right, wait. Since we just have a couple of minutes before the break, or maybe we don't have, but let's just look at this footnote here. Max, you like this footnote, right?
I was just curious where it was coming from.
Yeah, it's coming from the I don't really remember exactly where I should have looked it up, I guess, but it's from the tshuva that I found in the Bar Ilan shoot project. So it brought this comment at the bottom. He writes, or I'll read. We can't katav a kolbo b'shem haravid v'harikanati sham b'shem haritzba u'barashba v'rikanati u'b'tshuva sarosh katuv tam nosaf lahatir shchita. Another reason to she'im yada hachole shema'achalin oto davar iser teh nafsho katza b'zeh v'lo yochal v'yavoli de sakana. Another reason that you shouldn't give him nevela is because he might not want to eat it. He might figure out that this is nevela and he won't eat it, and he needs to eat something, so it won't work. Just practically, he doesn't want to eat it. It reminds me of a joke. Want to hear a joke? The girl, the girl is this very frum woman. A girl is sick, and the doctors say she has to eat pig. That's the only way that she'll be saved. And just there's something special in the pig meat that gives her exactly what she needs, and no other thing else will. Sorry. The girl refuses, absolutely refuses. And her parents are pleading with her. The doctors are pleading with her, and she says, "Only on one condition will I eat it: if you get a proper shochet to shech the pig, and follow all and salt the pig, and do everything that you would normally do." So they say, "Oh, it's pikuach nefesh. What can we do? We want her to eat it. That's the only way she'll eat it. Fine." Well, they should bring a shochet. They shecht it. They salt it. They're shechting it. They open it. They check the lungs, and they see, sure enough, there's a shaila of trephus on the lungs. So they bring it. They bring the lungs to the rabbi. They say, "Rabbi, is this kosher?" The rabbi says, "Kosher? You want me to say whether this is kosher? No, it's a pig." So yeah, that's the joke. Anyway, yeah. So the guy won't eat it if he knows it's nevela. Okay, again. We said that. You'll come to a danger. And that's why they permitted. Here's the interesting part, actually. So it's not me making this up. The Rashba believes that this question is dependent upon whether you view Shabbat as dechuya or hutra. She'im Shabbat hutra, as I adif tishchot avuro. If Shabbat is permitted, so that you need to get the animal, so get it in. You're not doing any isser. By shchita is permitted now, so there's no isser. It's not allowed at all. So give him kosher meat. The im Shabbat dechuya etzel, but if it's just dechuya, then it would be better to give him nevela. Why? Can someone explain that to me? If it's dechuya, then better just give him nevela. Then, because you don't need to violate Shabbat. You could give him the nevela. So dechuya means when you have to, you can break Shabbat. But here you don't have to. The doctor says nevela is just as good as kosher meat. So you don't have to violate Shabbat. So choose whichever isser is less, and it's less. So it's just dechuya. Shabbos is still there. It's still shaking. It's still yelling out, "I'm Shabbat. Don't violate me." So now I have a question: should I violate Shabbat or nevela? So violate nevela. But if it's hutra, then there's no Shabbat telling you anything. So you're not doing anything wrong. Yeah, Max.
Also, if it's hutra, then you're still then there's no isser at all, but you would be violating an isser potentially by feeding the nevela.
Yeah, but I can say the same thing, couldn't I, by dechuya? If it's dechuya, it's dechuya. I'm not doing an isser now. I'm doing shchita. It's not dechuya. I mean, if I'm doing an isser, it's dechuya, so I didn't do an avera also.
But
see what I'm saying?
Does that still apply to the nevela that you're feeding? As in there's
I'm saying even if it's dechuya, I could still justify shchita, because I could say it's dechuya, so push off Shabbat and do shchita. Either way,
right? But if you say that doing shchita and then feeding that shchita is a completely mutter act, then you're favoring a completely and then you feed an avela. then there would still be the issue of the nevela is the problem.
No, but I'm just saying I could claim that either way with shuta with the chuya or hutra, I could still say it's better to do the shchita, couldn't I? Because I could say it's the chuya or it's hutra do shchita. But you have to say the way I said it.
I guess my point is really on the hutra, not on the
Right. You have to say it the way I said it. That when it's the chuya, Shabbat is still there. It's just pushed. It's just held back, but it's still there, and therefore you still always have to make a calculation, which is better to do. And your only head there is to break Shabbat when there's no other choice. But when there's another choice, so eat nevela. I think that's the best way to say it. All right, let's take a break here, and we'll come back with the Shuta Rashba. The recording. Okay, so we're on the Rashba now.
שאלת עוד שהודיע לך דעתי במה שנשאל הרייבד, זיכרונה לברכה, ונסתפק בו הרמב"ן, זיכרונה לברכה. בכל שיש בו סכנה שמותר לשחוט לו בשבת. So someone wrote to him asking him about a sick person who's sick, who's mortally sick, whether you're allowed to shech for him on Shabbat. אם יש שם נבלה, מי נאמר, כיוון שיש שם נבלה, לא נשחוט לו, או מתירים לשחוט, ולא נאכילנו לו נבלה. So if
That's our same question. Yeah. Which is better?
Right.
All right, go on.
ואני כבר נשאלתי על זה, והשבתי ואמרתי שאכתוב לך. Okay, so here's his answer. תשובה שמעתי מאחד מגדולי הרבנים שהעיד משם הרב רבי מאיר מרוטנברג.
Oh, so that's who we just read. Right? That's Maharami Rottenberg. So he says, I heard from one of the Gedolei Rabbanan that he heard from a Rav Gadol. Yeah.
שהורה להתיר לשחוט אפילו במקום שיש שם נבלה להאכילו. So basically, he said putra, that you're allowed to shech even if you could have just chosen to serve him unkosher meat without shechting.
Right.
אלא שהטעם שאמרו לי משמו חלוש מאוד, על כן איני כותבו לך. But the reasoning that was given in the name of the Maharami Rottenberg is really weak, so I'm not going to tell it to you.
What was his reasoning? Wait, what was his reasoning?
His reasoning was, I'm trying to remember his specific reasoning. Oh, it had to do with Yom Tov. Because on Yom Tov we say with Ochel Nefesh, that you don't have to give unkosher meat, you can just shech. So too, we apply that to Pikuach Nefesh on Shabbat.
Right. This is kind of a little bit wacko. It is a little bit wacko, right? Because like, who would ever think that you should be eating the Vela on Yom Tov? Right? It's just like, why would that be your thought? Obviously, Ochel Nefesh means you could do Shechita. I mean, but he's saying, okay, whatever. It's a little bit weird reasoning. I shouldn't call it whack. I'm mean, saying wacko is just like perverse. It's kind of not intuitive at all. But he basically is saying that it's Hutra. That was his idea. That's Hutra. Okay.
Vehu Rav Sheigidli Ken Dato. So is he saying that it's the person that the Rashba heard from who told him the Maharam of
the guy who reported it agreed with the Maharam, I think. I think that's what he's saying. Vehu Harav Sheigid Li Ken Dato. He also thought so. He also thought maybe he also thought it was bad. I don't know. I don't know what he also thought that the reasoning was kalush, or either he also agreed with the Maharam. Doesn't really matter.
But then it's weird because then it says that it's weird to me. Maybe I'm just not understanding it. V'tama mishum, and then it seems like he does give.
Okay. So I think it's like this. V'hu harav shegidli ken dato. He also agreed that you should do shchita and you shouldn't eat nevela, but his tam is different.
Yes. And the tam is the one that we saw in the footnote.
The tamam
mishum de'im ein shachatin lo yavo lidei sakana sheimna milechol hanevela ve'yamut.
Okay.
And his reasoning,
they both agree, right? His reasoning is a different is what we saw in the footnote, right?
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to me, that last reasoning is interesting because I think that could even work for Shabbat being dechuya. Like you could say Shabbat's dechuya, but it's kind of like your joke. If the person is like,
no other choice.
I really won't need take under. Right. So it preserves this thing Psak as the Maharam Midratenberg, but totally changes the framework.
Right, but it could be because of Dechuya, right? Like I said, it could be Dechuya, and we say still you can shech because there's no other way to do it. Like people won't eat pig. Velinira.
Velinira shakol talui b'machloket im nomar Shabbat Dechuya or nomar Shabbat Hutra etzel chole. So it all hinges on this question of whether it's Dechuya or Hutra. Im nomar Shabbat Hutra etzel chole shochatin lo shelo asra Torah malechet Shabbat etzel chole. So if it's Hutra, then you can shech because there's just no iser. V'shochatin lechole b'Shabbat k'terech sheshochatin anu leatzmenu. So you do it the same way you would do it on chol. V'kederech she'amru b'tuma l'man da'amar tuma hutra b'tzibur she'im nitma hakos afilu yesham kos acher noten litor afilu min hakos shenitma.
Right. We have this idea that betuma l'man da'amar tuma hutra b'tzibur. If tuma is permitted in the tzibur, then even a person is tahor, you would still could give him the cup that's tameh and make him tameh because really it's permitted now in the tzibur. In other words, it's gone. The isser of becoming tameh is gone. So therefore, there's no concept of a kos. It's actually kind of like I once read I was sitting in the lounge in Pardes and I read a reformed journal of Judaism. And all the rabbis were talking about, it was about kashrut. The issue was about kashrut. And all the rabbis were talking about kashrut, how it's important, how it's nice, how it's wonderful, we should keep kashrut. And then one rabbi, who was like older than all the other rabbis, wrote an article, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything is kosher. We're Reform. According to Reform, all meat is kosher. There's no such thing as not kosher meat. So what do you mean kosher is fine? Of course, all things are kosher. So it's like that. Hutra. If it's Hutra, it's Hutra. So to become Tameh, there's no Isser anymore.
Rothenberg was Reform. Just kidding.
No, I'm not saying that. The Gemara is I'm saying the rabbis of Reform took this idea of Tuma Hutra with Tzibur. They took out the idea of a kashrus hutra b'tzibur, which there is no such concept. I'm just explaining that the concept of tuma hutra b'tzibur means that it's gone. The halacha is gone in certain circumstances. Like on I think it's talking about like especially on aliyah regel, something like that. Anyway, that's a different case. I don't really remember the case of when hutra b'tzibur. Okay. Anyway, I was just giving you an anecdote. Aval.
Well, למאן דאמר,
Yeah.
אבל למאן דאמר דחויה היא מאכילין לו הנבלה שהוא צריך לאכול, ואין אנו עוברים לשחוט לו. So if it's דחויה, then you give him the treif meat. שבמקום שיש לו בשר לאכול, לא נעבור אנו ולא נדחה את השבת. Because if you
Right.
have the meat available to you, then you're not going to break Shabbat.
There's Shabbat. You have to weigh. You have to say Shabbat is more chamur than eating the vela. So eating the vela because the Shabbat is still there.
וכמדומה שהלכה כמאן דאמר שבת דחויה היא ולא הותרה. So he's
Oh.
paskening that.
Yeah, so therefore you should eat the nevela. Yeah, go ahead.
מכל מקום, כל שאין שם נבלה, לא אמרינן לגוי לשחוט, כיוון שהיא דחויה אצלו, ותדע לך שהרי שנינו בברייתא אין עושים דברים הללו, לא על ידי גויים ולא על ידי קטנים, אלא על ידי גדולי ישראל. So even though it's דחויה, nonetheless, if you don't have access to treif meat, you do not tell a non-Jew to go ahead and shech the meat, because we have a baraita which says, no, non-Jews don't do it, and minors don't do it, adult Jews do it.
Yeah, fair. You read that correctly. Adults do it. Well, you can misread that, and you didn't. That's very good. Gedolei Yisrael does not mean dafka rabbis. It just means adults. Gedolim, no, it's not Ketani, and Yisrael, not Goyim. Exactly. So he's saying if there wouldn't be any tray for meat available, and you had to shecht anyway, then the Jew should shecht. So he's actually saying it's dichliya, and therefore you can't eat the treifa. Now, these are just representative opinions because there are more opinions on both sides. But these are the main ones, I would say. Okay. Got to look at some. Wait just a second. Let's see what this my next source is. Yeah. Maybe I'll ask somebody else to read it a little bit now. Thank you very much. And maybe maybe Jessica, you want to read?
Sure. From
This is-
Shiva Shamati or
This is the Shulchan Aruch.
sorry, yeah. So מה כשחלל אינם צריכה עומד, אפילו אין שם בקיאים וחלה אינו אומר כלום, עושים לו כל שרגילים לעשות לו בכל, אבל כשיודעים ומכירים באותו חולה שממתין ואין צריך חילול איסור לחלל עליו, אף על פי שהיא מכה של חלל. So we're talking about some kind of internal blow or illness.
Mhm.
You don't need to make a kind of estimation. That even if you don't have experts there and the ill person themselves doesn't say anything, you should just treat it the same way you treat it on whole. But if you know for sure that with this particular illness, there's no need to, treat it on that day, then it's okay to wait.
Wait, so does this prove anything one way or the other?
Not really, because it's talking about, are we in the case of Pekuach Nefesh? It's not talking about, are we docher or...
So the Magen of Ram says that from this we see that the Shulchan Aruch is paskening that it's hutra. Why?
Oh, because of the Regilim Lasatla.
Because what?
Because of the Regilim Lasatla. He's not saying
Right.
to do any kind of shinui or
Or even trying to make calculations. How can I mitzamtzem? Maybe I can do fewer things. I can just, in other words, like, when you go to a hospital in Israel and on Shabbat and you have to do something, a lot of times they have like a special pen that's, that works by grama, or I've even seen when I was at one hospital, they have had they had the doctor or the nurse was telling an Arab what to write. Because they had to fill out like the form, they had to fill out like things on the computer. So she was telling the Arab what to write. The Arab woman, presuming the Arab woman is not Jewish. And the idea is that she shouldn't violate Shabbat, but the Arab woman should do this, even though it's not, even though you're in a case of pikuach nefesh, or not pikuach nefesh, I don't know, sakana, whatever, maybe a sakana. So anyway, the point is you don't have to make calculations. It sounds like he's saying, maybe you could say that. That's the way the Magen Avraham means. Sifkat and Dal. Okay. Now look at this next, Sif.
כשנחללים שבת על חולה שיש בה סכנה, משתדלים שלא לעשות על ידי עקום וקטינים ונשים, אלא על ידי ישראל גדולים ובני דת. So don't use non-Jews, children and women as workaround. It should be an adult male Jew.
But there's a yesh bo sakana.
Someone with knowledge.
Right. Does that prove anything?
Again, I sort of think not really. I think it's this independent principle from a writer. But
Well, I would think the reason.
Yeah, I think I want the Ramah here. So that doesn't really prove anything, but look at the Ramah. Jessica, you there? Wait, I don't hear you, Jessica.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. ויש אומרים אם אפשר לעשות בלא דיחוי ובלא איחור על ידי שינוי, עושה על ידי שינוי, ואם אפשר לעשותו על ידי עקום בלא איחור כלל, עושים על ידי עקום. וכן נוהגים, אבל במקום שיש לחוש שיתעצל העקום, אין לעשות על ידי עקום. So the Ramah says, well, the Orvazarur and others say that if it's possible to do it without there being any kind of delay or problems through a shinui, then you should do that. And if it's possible to do it through a non-Jew without any kind of delay, then do that. But if you're worried that the non-Jew is going to kind of hold things up, then you shouldn't do it by the non-Jew.
So what does this say? What does the Ramah hold?
He holds he definitely holds Docha.
Certainly holds Dechuya. Right.
Yeah.
Dechuya. Shabbat is Dechuya. In other words, try to mitzamtzem as much as possible. Unless you're worried that the Akum won't do it properly. Yitatzel, he'll be lazy. Okay, so we see that this seems like you could say there's a machloket between the Ramah, and there was the same machloket that we see in the Rashba and the Maharam. We see between the paskening of the Mechaber and the Ramah. Just a second. I mean, everybody would agree that you do all the parts of the tipul. It's not like you're going to stop and say, well, this is enough, he'll probably be fine. You finish the whole job. You're not going to stop in the middle, whether you say it's Dechuya or Hutra, certainly Hutra, and even Dechuya, you would finish the whole job. Whatever job, whatever you need to do. Okay, so we see that's interesting, machlok. Okay, well, let's read one more.
Wait, Robin, I have
Actually,
a
this is a new
question.
topic. Yeah, Isaac.
So in Sif Dalet, or sorry, so if Yod it says that you specifically should try to do it with a man instead of a woman, and that doesn't add up to me. Because if you say we don't, if part of the point is to prove that it's really dehui, and that's why we're using somebody who's fully obligated in Shabbos, we're not using a goy, we're not using a minor who could get, slide by. Why is there a gender distinction given that there's no gender distinction in being having a
But you're
huge
talking about in Sif Yud Bet?
Yeah.
Al Yidei
Shelo לעשות על ידי
Shelo
אחרים,
לעשות al yidei
וקטנים
akum,
ונשים,
ketanim,
אלא
v'nashim.
על ידי ישראל גדולים ובני
Yeah.
דעת. It says v'nashim.
Well, I mean,
These women.
listen, the book is written in a certain time period. You got to understand, you got to contextualize
Yes, but it's
the
still
book.
weird.
No,
Like
but I think
it's bringing even if look, even if what we're saying is like, oh yes, okay, because the problem with the phrase time bound mitzvot is that falls apart when you have things like Shabbos as a category, as like a.
I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think that's
Wait, I mean, like if that's what he's thinking of as sort of like default, no, okay, but then why? Like it still doesn't make any sense.
Can I
Right.
suggest
If you
something?
notice, by the way, just let me point out, if you notice in the Shut Rashba, he doesn't say lo al yedei goyim v'lo al yedei ketanim ela al yedei gedolei Yisrael. He doesn't mention gender.
Yeah, no one else does it. And
But
I
the Shulchan
can't see
Aruch
any
does.
logical reason to add it here.
Yeah. Before I say anything, you want to say something?
Well, Rav Nachum, like it's funny because before when I read the Baraita in the shoot of the Rashba, you said I read it correctly because I said adults rather than Gdolim like rabbis. But it's almost like the Machaber is reading it the other way. What you would have said is incorrect. It has to be
No.
Why? Well, but
B'nei
to
dat.
me,
He says, look at the end. He says,
That just means like they know
exactly.
what
But
they're
to
doing.
me, but in other words, it makes sense because you want Talmidei Chachamim doing it to show people you can violate Shabbat in cases of Pikuach Nefesh. And for them, obviously,
if you're waiting around for a
genders.
Talmid Chacham in order to
no,
fix
because
things,
we're
someone's gonna
worried.
end up
We're
dead.
worried that exactly. We're worried the other way around. It's
No,
not
it's
for
not.
tough.
It's
No,
not that. It's not that you're waiting around. It's that like someone has to eat shortly. You're already engaging in a question of do I give them unkosher meat or do I chef for them, etc. And so once you're engaging that question, you could say, okay, let it be the most pious, holy.
no, because
I think the Machaber is just reading it the other way.
I don't think so. I think he's just saying because he says b'nei dat, b'nei dat. B'nei dat is a very minimal criteria. Al yidei Yisrael gadol Yisrael in Sif Yud Bet Yisrael gadolim ub'nei dat. Be adult and intelligent. Now, there's not a person who has a mental deficiency, but a person who is an adult and has intelligence. He doesn't have to be a rabbi. That's all he means. He's adult and not mentally deficient. And the reason I would offer, without having really investigated it, is that we don't want to create the impression that you should only do it with a child or something or an akum, because then what if there's no child there? And what if you don't feel like you're going to run for looking for a child? No, if you've got adult men, let them do it. Don't. If we start telling people it's better to use a child, then people might refuse to do it, and then the person might die. Just who's ever on hand.
That hasn't, but that's not my question. My question is not why not use a child. My question is why specifically exclude using women.
Yeah, and I wanted to answer in a very pashtani, simplistic way. Just say that at the time in the 1400s in Sfat, women were less knowledgeable about halacha, and there's a concept maybe a woman does it not because that she's not obligated in Shabbat, but because maybe you'll think, in your faulty thinking. Oh no, in your right thinking. Maybe people will think if you always try to get a woman to do it, that it's because women don't know what they're doing. They don't know that it's forbidden, and so
But you don't have to try to always get
better
a
let
woman to do
somebody
it. You can
do
just
it who
not
doesn't know
ban
that it's
from
forbidden.
using women.
What?
There's no obligation that you always try to get a woman to do it. It's just that you don't say you don't get women to do it, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you're an adult, you fine.
Yeah,
So-
you could have. I don't think he means to say you can't let a woman do it. I just mean to say this. I think that's what he's saying is don't insist upon using a woman or an akum. Better to use an adult if that's what you have. Better to use an adult man because then nobody will get the false impression that there's some kind of idea that it's better to use a woman or better to use an akum. Or I think that's what he's saying. That people might have some kind of conception that you might have thought that women better to let an uneducated woman do it. He's saying no, don't use women because people will get a false impression. They'll think that you should always try to get women to do it.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but
folks.
also I think probably
You're asking it. You're putting me into a thicket of thorns, by your question.
well, I'm not trying to put you on a thicket of thorns just to put you in a thicket of thorns. It doesn't add up, and I think your reading relies on a reading of the first half of the sentence that just doesn't make sense to me. But
which half?
Like I think by saying so I don't read the first half of the sentence as saying, oh, it's preferable to get it's better not to use an akum or a katan or a isha. I read it as saying, don't use them.
Mishtadlim, it says.
Hmm?
It says mishtadlim. Look carefully. Michalin Shabbat al chol b'shev sakano. Mishtadlim shelo la'asot ha'yidei akum. We prefer. But obviously, you could use a woman or a child. We don't say we can't use them. We just say we prefer not to use a child or a woman because of the false impression it might make. That's all.
How you translate Mitzarfim Das Yisrael?
Where?
I'm sorry, Max gave us a good quotation.
Read the Tosefta one. I misquoted the Bavli
I don't know where you're looking.
in the chat.
Oh, in the chat. You expect me to read the chat while I'm teaching?
There. If I can interrupt, Max, why don't you read it to us?
Yeah, this is from the Tosefta. The Ein Omrim Yasu Dvarim Begoyim Uviktanim Aval Bigdolim Shabi Yisrael. Ein Omrim Yasu Dvarim Halalu Al Pi Nashim Al Pi Kusim Ela Mitzarfin Da'as Yisrael Imahen.
In other words, a Jew should participate. An educated Jew should participate in the actions. Is that how you translate it? Sarfim dat Yisrael imahem. It's a very strange lashon, but I guess that's what it means. But again, I don't. Yeah, from the Beit Yosef, Shanashim or Akutim.
That's where I got the mipnei. Was from the Beit Yosef.
Yale bedatam shelo nitan Shabbat lidchot afilu b'nei pikuach nefesh u'mibnei kach nimna'im milasot melacha zu u'mosrin oto l'kuti o l'isha. That's not what I said. Lasot mitoch kach yavo l'tatel b'melacha va'ati lidei sakana. He actually says, well, it's kind of opposite. He's saying that the women, or no, shanash. I think it's a partial quote. I'd like to see the whole sentence, but I think what he's saying is what I'm saying. That and again, he said mishtadlim. We prefer to use an adult male Jew so that we create an impression that this is totally permitted, and that if we would use only people of less education or less adulthood, then we might think that you'd have to.
What are you doing with the Mitzarfim? That line about Mitzarfim?
I think that means that if you're going to use a Jew, if you're going to use a child, let's say, better to have an adult do it along with it. I don't know exactly how. It's a little bit difficult.
I think it's like the adult Mitzarfi was like Mistarev, right?
Right.
And therefore, you might think that the mature adult male, excuse me, has gotten out of it because they had a child do it. But no, the da, he's using the child's body, but it's the das of the adult.
Are you saying that the adult is directing the child?
It means that the child wouldn't be doing it unless if you were directing them, I think. Unless the child knew you wanted them to do something.
But anyway, I mean, let's agree that in the end, the ultimate concept is that the reason we want adults to do this is so that we don't create a false impression
Right.
that adults can't do it.
That I'll agree on the adults. I still think there are gender issues, but I think
there are gender issues also. Don't use women unless there's no other. Mishtadlim not to use women, because we also might make a false impression that only women can do it, and we want to deny that false impression and say no. Even anybody can do it. Even a Kohen Gadol can do it. We don't have Kohen Gadol, so we say an adult male Jew. But even women could do it, but we mishtadlim. Again, the word is mishtadlim. It doesn't say we don't let women do it. It says mishtadlim shelo lasot al-yedei akum v'ketani v'nash. We try, if there's an adult there, adult male, rather let him do it. Anyway, I just wanted to show you the machloket between the Maharam and the Rashba persists. I think there are those that might say, I even though the Ramah is clearly, or whatever, there are those who might say, no, the Ramah and the Mechaber both agree, and there's no machloket at all. But you could, like I said, you could try to say that no, even if it's hutra, you still try to do it in a way that reduces the Yisr, and that's all the Ramah is saying. But I'm just pointing out that there is a way to understand it as a machloket, and people who like to see machlokot, there is one. Okay. We don't have that much time. We have a whole nother big topic, which is very nogei l'maisa. I don't know what we should. I think actually, maybe we'll just stop here. I think we should just stop here. We'll stop a little early because it's a whole nother topic, which is cholesh ein bo sakana. Yeah, so we'll do cholesh ein bo sakana next time, which will be after Shavuot. Any final thoughts?
Yeah. Could I ask you a question? Could you just remind me where the Magen Avraham was that says that the Machaber is paskening Hutra? Unfortunately, I'm on Ala Torah, and I just didn't see it.
Yeah, just a second. I have it written down here.
Obviously, everyone else can leave if.
No, but maybe we all want to look at it, actually. You're talking about the Magen Avraham Sivkat and Dalet. That's on the Shulchan Aruch. That's saying that the Shulchan Aruch.
Kol she regilin, that one. Mashma afal pi she'ein bo sakana b'miniat hadvarim.
Let me just check. Okay, that's what I have in my notes. Let me check inside. In Kaf.
Oh, anyway. Okay.
Culture Agilin, Mashma Afal Pi.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
She'ein bo sakana b'miniat hadavar hahu.
Right.
Even though it's not crucial that I do this, you could still do it. Yeah, exactly. In other words, even though this thing, if I wouldn't do it, it wouldn't actually bring him a sakana, but once I'm involved in it, I can do it. It's almost like, I can write his prescription, I don't know, for later. Almost. I can do whatever is necessary, even though there's no sakana involved. If I wouldn't do this thing,
Is this is all this the source for all things being equal? The Talmud Chacham of the city should drive the person to the hospital. If all things were equal.
I've heard that idea. Just don't see it right here.
Yeah, I understand, but it should be
I
here.
think that's reading the Baraita delay in the way that Rav Nachum
Yeah.
doesn't like,
You won't
and
let
the way
that
that I
go.
didn't do.
You won't let it go. You won't let it go.
I won't let it go.
I have to think further about that because that has become halacha psuka, even though it's theoretical. I've actually was in that situation several times, twice as a shul rabbi. But
I mean, that's an exaggeration. I would say it's an exaggeration. It's the same idea. It is conceptually, it's correct. It's just taking it one step further. Not only should it be an adult, it should be the rabbi. But I don't see it here. You know what? Let's look. Just since we do have a few more minutes, let's look. I'll go get a Mr. Brewer. Mr. Brewer, Sif Katan Yud Aled. That's not an Mishnah Berurah Tzivkat and Yudalit. I think that's where he talks about that the Ramah is different from the Mechaber. Mishnah Berurah Tzivkat and Yudalit. Kol Shiragili. So wait, this is on Halacha Dalit. Makash Halal. You do everything Kol Shiragili. Here, Max, maybe you want to read?
Yeah. Okay. Kol sheragilim mima achalim urefuros umashma afa pi she'en bo sakana b'mnias hadavar hahu kivan she'acholi yesh bo sakana v'yesh bo hadavar tzorach ktsas uregilin la'asos lo b'chol osin gam Shabbos.
Oh, so there you go. He's saying the Mechaber is saying he's defining it very carefully. It's not like I can light a cigarette or I can, I can do anything I want. It's he's very careful about what he says. There is some kind of need to do this thing, but it's not necessary. It's like it's the need, but it's not going to necessary to do it. But regilila soplo, that would be the normal way to do it. I don't know. After you do the stitches, you put on a bandage over it, and you put tape, and you cut the tape, and you put it. Maybe that's just the normal thing to do. But you could theoretically do stitches without that. But the normal way to do it is to cover it. Let's say. I'm just making up. I don't know what doctors do. So if there's a little bit of tzarech, you could do it, even though it's violating Shabbat. But you're allowed because Shabbos is hutra. Go ahead.
V'yeh bior halacha shehevenu mikama poskim desvira lehu shafil makom shetzarich lilul ein mechalin al yedei Yisrael ela b'davar sheyesh lachush bo she'im lo yasu lo yichaver alav cholio
Lo yichabed alav.
lo yichaber alav chol.
In other words, that if you don't do it,
What
what is he saying? You should do ein mechalin al yedei Yisrael. You don't let a Jew violate Shabbat. Ela b'davar sheyesh lachush bo she'im lo yaseh. Only by things that if you wouldn't do them, this is too many triple negatives here. Ela b'davar sheyesh lachush bo she'im lo yasehu lo. If you wouldn't do it for him, yichabed alav hacholi. He'll get more sick. You can only do things that will actually prevent him from becoming more sick, and not cutting the tape and putting a bandage on when you don't necessarily need. Okay, go ahead. V'yachol listaken, and he'll get in danger because of that. Aval.
Aval, kol shebarur she'ein b'minias ha'osod davar chashash sakana, af al pi, shemikol makom tzarichu lo, regilun la'asos lo, ein osino so b'Shabbos, ela al yedei eno Yehudi kedin tzorchei chola she'ein bo sakana. Right, once it's something that isn't totally necessary, even if it's something that's normally done for the illness, that's when you have to rely on a non-Jew. And it becomes
just like you would for somebody who is chole she'ein bo sakana.
Right, like in that moment, it slides from yesh sakana to ein sakana.
Right. Okay, fine. So basically, the Mishnah Berurah it's clearly mashma from the Mishnah Berurah that he understands. I mean, he's not mashma. He's saying that he understands the mechaber to be lenient as far as chilul of let's say, of partially extraneous things, of slightly of things that have a little bit of tzarech but not a full tzarech. But then he himself paskins like that Ramah that we saw in what was it, Yud Bet, right? Yud Bet or Yud? No. Okay. As far as your question about letting the rabbi do it, I've definitely heard that, but I didn't see it yet. Okay, let's stop here. And I wish everybody a good Shavuos, a good Shabbos.
Memorial Day, good Memorial Day.
And good Memorial Day. And I appreciate everybody who came, even though it was Memorial Day. You may have had other places to be, but I'm glad you found your proper place here.
Listen, none of these people were invited to the beach. That's all I can say.
Invited to the beach.
Anyway,
My
thank you
nearest
very
beach
much,
is
Rabbi Dan.
Onsay. I try not to go to the beach.
Okay.
I have fond memories of sitting in the traffic, going to the Jersey Shore.
All right. Take care.
Okay, take care.
Thank
All
you.
the
Good
best.
Shabbos.
Bye.
Shabbos.